Hello. Welcome to Trader Game Money Matters. I know some of you guys have been asking where I've been and what I've been doing. Well, despite the obvious, which is the coronavirus, I've been doing a lot of writing, and I published a book called Time Value of Money. So you guys can check that out. If you want direct orders, you can go on the Facebook page, Trader Game Money Matters. Place your order there, or Phone Face Publishers, and you can also get the first chapter of it on Amazon. If you have an Amazon account, then it's free to read the chapter. But yeah, guys, the sample is there. Okay, so now it's time to get back to work, and today we're gonna be discussing different acquisitions that have been happening around the world, and the most vital ones that I feel like can be really beneficial to your trading portfolio if they're done right. Okay, usually an acquisition is when a company is buying another company. We're going to be discussing tax revenues. We're going to be discussing why it's important at this time. I feel like, the tax should be reduced as opposed to increased. The impact of interest rates, obviously the entire impact of the coronavirus on the economy. Because right now, guys, things have shattered. Like everything has crashed because of this virus, and it has sent the economy on a down spiral, trajectory. But anyway, we're optimistic about the future, optimistic about Africa, we're optimistic about the global economic growth that will happen in the next few months to come. So, at the start of this pandemic, although, many of us didn't even see it coming, it was difficult to predict if the virus was gonna impact the world like it did. And unfortunately, millions and millions of people have died. May their soul rest in peace. And there's a lot of healthcare workers that were taking care of other people, even doctors, that contracted the disease themselves, and you'll never be forgotten, guys. The government took drastic measures to put lockdowns, okay, to make a lockdown with 5 different levels. So level 5 being, everything's gonna be closed, and then level 1 being everything will be, things will resume back to normality. Of course, we're not at level 1 yet. In fact, it's really bad now because there's so many cases that have been reported already, over 100,000 cases that have been reported in South Africa. And, as opposed to moving to level 1, I believe we're going to move back to level 5. Level 5, in terms of the economy, if you were to look at it in terms of the economy, like a gradually phased recovery of the economy would include, the risk level, which is determined based on the level of infection and the capacity of the healthcare system. So this system has been created through consultation and an assessment of risk transmissions of the virus posed by a sector, expected in the impact of the sector. There's been measures such as social distancing that have come into play, and sanitizing. This is our new normality now, and obviously we have to adjust. Although, for many of us, like the environments that we used to operate in terms of business have really shifted, and this has caused a lot of regulations to also change, and the way you conduct your business. Basically, a reset of the whole economy has forced a lot of businesses either out of business or to re-strategize and try to find another way to operate. Obviously, there's also been travel bans, returning to work restrictions, where you find people that are, working from home, and just to curb the virus, which has helped to some extent. And congratulations to our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. But at the same time, there's been more and more infections. But at least now, the general public knows what they need to do in order to protect themselves. So, as far as tax, there's been tax cuts, meaning the government has enabled businesses to pay less tax for their employees than normal. Depending on your turnover, of course. If, let's say, you have a turnover of 1 million rand, just out of my head, I think you'd pay 40% less tax to SARS. Of course, not all businesses qualify for these kind of tax reductions and tax costs, which I feel like, to a certain extent, it's very unfair, because usually informal traders, small business owners, are not really people that even match the income bracket that the government has set out. So most of them don't even qualify for that 500 billion rand package, which is, as addressed by the President of South Africa, that there's a stimulus package which is going to be given to businesses that have suffered and that can prove beyond reasonable doubt that they've been impacted by the coronavirus, which also, it's very challenging because most businesses do not have, the requirements that they want. Maybe the requirements can be 6 months, 12 months audited statements. It can be, listen, most people, especially informal traders that are in the CBD of Johannesburg, are not really people that have registered businesses, and they don't really make the kind of money that you can, have a business account or anything like that, or you can officially register the business. It's just people that are selling at a very low cost, and they just want to make that 300, 400 just to buy their family's food and all of that, which I have to credit the government, because they gave another alternative to say, okay, if you're not working, you can apply for the social relief fund. The social relief fund, although a lot of people haven't received it, not as far as I know, I believe it's still on the way, because I'm under the impression that a lot of guardians and mothers have been receiving their relief grants along with their children's grants. But as far as, the other grants, I'm not so sure yet. Anyway, this plan was made in a way that was going to benefit South Africa as a whole. And the idea was, I feel like they should have raised that 500 billion rand in another way, as opposed to going to, lenders like IMF, for example, which was initially the plan. But obviously, we're not sure what happened. Maybe they realized they didn't have enough money. They couldn't raise taxes. They couldn't do anything like that in order to give people the 500 billion rand. But okay, so they decided to go to lenders, which is IMF and all of that, which is good, because that's what they did to do. The World Bank, IMF are institutions that are there to help different countries who have been struck by, different situations that force countries to not relapse, in situations where they could have easily relapsed, or they could have easily collapsed. Okay, so now another tax relief that has been very beneficial in the past 2-3 months is the fact that so there are acts, right, in situations such as the one that we find ourselves in. There's acts that protect the country from such things as tax, as I discussed. So this is, for example, the Disaster Management Tax Relief Bill and Draft Disaster Management Tax Relief Administration Bill. So all these bills, amongst others, they help so that there's tax relief in terms of disaster. So the lockdowns were very hard on people, I must say, because there were places, in South Africa where soldiers were literally beating people up, people losing their lives because they were being shot at, they were being assaulted by the police. They've been, there's been situations where there was an abuse of power, basically. So as far as, going back to work, a lot of businesses were not allowed to open, and are still not allowed to open unless if they follow strict regulations and what I would call good business practices. So basically, this involves, for example, agro-processing, hygiene-related matters, telecommunications sector and their regulations, and each business having the responsibility to follow such regulation in that particular sector. So basically the people that are working in that specific environment, there's strict rules that the business has to follow in order to, if only if it's an essential service company. An essential service can be something like a pharmacy, for example, a construction company, if you will, and the contextual considerations as far as contracts that were made and those that were yet to be made had to be changed because they had to accommodate the virus. There were also reliefs in terms of accounts. A lot of businesses had that where people have accounts, the general public has accounts on. They were almost forced to discuss payment plans with their employees because some people lost their jobs, some people didn't have money to pay their accounts, especially during the lockdown. So there had to be drastic steps that had to be taken by the government in order to ensure that there's relief also in terms of that. So there also had to be amendments in terms of if your company, if let's say you're a business owner and your company is, it has a board and has executive committees, there had to be evaluated opportunities for transactions which were not previously available. So mitigation of risks, managing liquidity, and aligning corporate strategies. It had to be done in a specific way. It still needs to be done in a specific kind of way, following regulatory and being quick to rectify underlying problems. And also due diligences, they had to be reworked logistically, and there was an expectation of the kind of performance that was expected or that is expected when doing a due diligence. And amendments of such things as MOI, which is Memorandum of Incorporation. So the CIPC basically also evaluated the businesses that are on their registry, and those that had essential service, they had to apply to operate during the lockdown, of which they were given a certificate that said, okay, we can operate during a lockdown, but even then under strict conditions, as I previously mentioned. And accessing to funds and solvency and liquidity resolutions, they had to be taken into consideration in the director's assessment of the forecast financial position of the relevant company. And obviously policies and everything had to be reworked in order to fit this new normal of the COVID-19 virus. So in terms of mergers and acquisitions, there's been a lot of deals that were made last year in 2019, but unfortunately some of them, the coronavirus has presented challenges that can literally drown the deal. So basically although we're not certain yet, but most of the acquisition deals that were supposed to happen on the first half of the year in 2020 had been pushed back, mainly because of also such things as purchase prices, like with everything that's going on now and the conditions and the regulatory approvals, the due diligence as I just discussed, all of those things were impacted by the coronavirus, and that means price can significantly change, and you know a lot of deals would have to either be paused or cancelled in totality, cancelled completely, and timelines and exclusivities, all those things. Like if a deal was supposed to, let's say for example, Long for Life, which is Brian Joffe's company, was supposed to finish buying, just as an example, Sobe by June 2020. The transaction usually would take a few months for the money to be paid over, especially in terms of companies buying other companies or buying shares and acquiring other companies. So this has significantly changed. That's why I said the playing field has really drastically changed in terms of how people operate. But this can be an opportunity for acquirers, in a sense of, if I'm buying a company, probably right now would be in times of financial distress, when companies would be looking to do business rescues, for operational reasons, or companies would be filing for bankruptcy and because they've lost income and so forth. This can be a buying opportunity for someone who's into buying businesses. If you're in a private equity space, then you'll know, like, you look for such opportunities in order to save jobs, in order to save the company, in order to do the best that you can, in order to save, industries, basically. So the purchase prices can significantly change, and the price valuations and adjustments would have to be taken into consideration because of the coronavirus. So if, let's say for example, Sobe was supposed to be bought this year, with a deal that was discussed last year with, let's say, 300 million rand, they would have to relook the whole thing and cut down the price to possibly even half of the evaluation amount. So again, due diligence have to be done properly again, and they have to mitigate the risks, and they also have to look for other potential opportunities that may come, and opportunities that are presented by the coronavirus. Unfortunately, this is just Greek to someone who's on the side of the street, because the impact that the virus has had on the general public, not private equity companies, not billionaires, not people that are wealthy, but the poor, the majority of the poor people in South Africa. It has caused havoc, I just read a case now, rest in peace, I'll get his name, but he was submitted to hospital because of corona-related issues, as they said. But when he got there, he even tweeted the health minister to say, look, I haven't had food in 48 hours. And unfortunately, after that, he died. May his soul rest in peace. These are the kind of challenges that are faced on the ground, in the field. Not in the boardroom, in the field. The impact the virus has had on a normal person, an average person in the street, has been devastating. We need to pull together to help one another. So rest in peace to Shonisanani Litole, who was 35 years old, who was admitted at Tembisa Hospital with breathing difficulties. So people like Shonisani were people that were contributing to the economy, because he was an entrepreneur. And by that, it means he could have possibly, if he wasn't already doing it, created jobs, saved a lot of people, and helped a lot of people. But unfortunately, this was not the case. So this is medical negligence in terms of the hospital, because not feeding a person for 48 hours, although they're admitted to a public hospital, is ridiculous. And for him to be suspected that he had coronavirus, only to find that there was no proof, even. It's really heart-wrenching. So rest in peace. Follow hashtag Shonisanani Letole on Twitter, and let's try to, hold people accountable. These institutions have to be held accountable because they were negligent. They were very, very negligent. While on that as well, rest in peace to George Floyd. Rest in peace to everybody who lost their lives due to, brutality, specifically police brutality. We really need to take action, and we really need to look at these measures and have peaceful protests in order to address these issues so that they can be addressed and the government can do something about it.